It's a delight to be here. Thank you so much. Thank you, Stephen, for everything you do. But thank you, everybody here today, for being such wonderful businesses. It is always a proper pleasure. We don't always get it in this postcode, but to be in the company of innovators, entrepreneurs, employers. People who take risk, put capital on the line, give people a chance of employment, sometimes their very first chance of employment. And without you, without your members across the United Kingdom, there will be no growth. There'll be no jobs, no prosperity, none of the taxes that are required to fund our public services. Now, I think, Stephen, you were saying in 2024, the manufacturing sector of this wonderful country contributed 224 billion to the economy. So unless any government, unless any minister, politician has got a better idea of where to get that sort of impact in our economy, they should absolutely have your back. And it does astonish me, coming from business, how few in Westminster do sometimes understand that. And if they did, I hope that they would be more wary about piling on more red tape. I spent 25 years in business, and I do recall that cumulative impact of small but each individually consequential decision taken just across the road. I always say the law that is passed most often here in Westminster is the law of unintended consequence. Numbers for the Treasury are not just digits printed in ink, they've got a real impact on people's revenues and margins. And across the wider public sector, we do have to change, we do have to challenge the computer says no attitude that I'm afraid we too often find in our public servants, regulators and planners. When a government can't itself confidently project its vision for our country and economy, it's no point complaining that business confidence is then low. I crossed this Rubicon from business into politics with the sole ambition of trying to help our country grow. And as a patriot, we Conservatives want this government to succeed. There's no advantage for anyone watching them fly our country into the ground. But we sit here today in a per capita recession, even before the budget measures take effect in a month's time. And even if you accept, as I do, there's a very legitimate balance to be struck between tax and public spending. The way that the government has gone about things so far has been the most damaging for business. An increase in employers in national insurance rates and a huge adjustment in threshold, which announced to nothing less than a tax on jobs. Higher business rates for too many businesses. A death tax on those family businesses, often not the most profitable, but seeking to create something of value and pass that down to the next generation. And an exodus that we're now seeing of 1 millionaire leaving this country every 45 minutes, depleting us and reducing the tax rate for all of the rest of us. The harsh reality is that barely anyone who sits around the cabinet table has any experience of running a business. It's like, I sometimes say, asking a convention of traffic wardens to run the next British Grand Prix. Next week in Parliament, we're debating the employment bill. I call it, not entirely in jest, a 1970s disco of discontent. Everything we remember that was bad about industrial relations will be back. Cutting the notice period for strikes, causing immense harm and disruption. Day one rights to be able to sue your employer. Imposing fixed hourly contracts, even when we all know that businesses are very often seasonal. And when it started, that employment bill was 150 closely typed pages. Last week, it expanded to a titanic 191 pages. And after a whole sheaf of amendments today, I fear, my friends, it's likely to be 250 pages. When the Chancellor said she wanted growth, I'm not sure exactly that that is what she meant. The government's independent watchdog considered its own impact assessments on that bill to be not fit for purpose. Imagine if you had a safety assessment that said that about your business. although not before agreeing it was a £5 billion a year cost on business. So if the government was remotely serious about growth, this is the very first thing that they would drop. There's one more thing. We're in the business now of telling hard truths. There's one more that we need to face up to. It is not possible to have a viable manufacturing sector in this country without competitive costs of energy. You face the highest industrial energy electricity costs of any developed economy. In Birmingham in the West Midlands, a business might pay almost 26 pence a kilowatt hour for electricity. In Birmingham, Alabama, a competitor would pay just 6.5 pence per hour. That's 4 times lower. A manufacturer in Portsmouth trying to buy 1 million kilowatt hours might pay 258,000 for its electricity. A manufacturer in Pittsburgh would pay just 64,000. It is a miracle that so many of you here today are still in business. The cost of energy is embedded in every single thing that we make, and yet this government has slammed the brakes on exploiting our North Sea oil and gas. Yes, we need renewables, and yes, in particular, we need new nuclear baseload, which has the potential to create thousands of new manufacturing jobs in an SME supply chain across the country, but not at the expense of ruining our manufacturing economy right now, and not at the expense of denying you the benefit of 3.3 billion barrels of extractable reserves that lie under the North Sea today. So what about my party? I'm proud of much that we and Make UK achieved and were able to do for business and small and medium-sized enterprises when we were in government. Full expensing, support for reform of apprenticeships, raising educational standards to some of the best in the world, more investment in innovation, and a trade policy which started to sketch out opportunities for growth. But we didn't get everything right, and for that, I apologise. We paid for the price for that last July, and we're now starting to earn back the right to govern in the future, starting with our job as the constructive official opposition to this government. So today I want to be clear. The Conservative Party is under new management. We're starting from first principles, and we will be unafraid to have the backs of wealth creators and risk takers. We'll bring forward policies to help private sector businesses grow, more new businesses being formed and existing businesses doing even better. Less red tape, fewer regulations, and faster decision-making. Celebrating success, celebrating excellence, and not being shy to support those who build our economy and create our country's wealth. We're listening, and I hope following today to be doing a great deal more listening and meeting with many of you here. Let me conclude by saying I'm ambitious for our country. The businesses represented here today are precisely those that the world needs more of. Advanced manufacturing and design, aerospace, automotive, pharmaceuticals, logistics, food and drink, defence and energy. Britain is blessed with countless examples of businesses, small and large, that lead the world in what they do. The rule of law, our skills base, our universities, the depth of our financial markets and our English language all remain sources of enduring advantage. Billions of people across the world look to us for democracy and our values. The world faces great challenges, from climate to ageing population to war and insecurity. But we have at our disposal the ferocious problem-solving power of business and private capital. Every problem can be an opportunity, and every opportunity can be a new enterprise or a new market. And I will never forget, and you must never allow us to forget, that it is not government that manufactures, builds or innovates for the benefit of society. It's all of you. Thank you. You need to stay.
Yeah, you can stand there. Would anyone like to ask a question? And if so, do you want to just pop up your hand and we'll whip a mic your way? There we are. I've got one. And we'll get on to you, Stephen, as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question, for your statement there. I'd perhaps like to ask you. I mean, you did just make a point that you said it was a miracle that some of us are still in business. I think you're right. I think after the last 14 years that we've had a party that's given us Brexit. We've had a party that's given us no industrial strategy. We've had a policy of managed decline of industry, Patrick Minford's plans. We've had Liz Truss. We've had corruption through COVID. And you talk about electricity prices. We've had a situation where the electricity prices are pegged to the gas prices. And that's been happening long before the latest government got into power. So have you taken some time to think about why we have those challenges? And perhaps you could say something about that.
Sure. Look, I'm not going to relitigate the entirety of the last 10, 14. Everyone's got their own different time horizons. And what we need to do is look forward, not back. I can't change the past. I don't think anyone in this room can, but that would be a fantastic product if you could. There were lots of things that the government got right as well. And so there's not much point relitigating that. But I did highlight a number of areas. There's areas that we could have gone faster, quicker. I think the support for exporters. I was relatively briefly the export minister. We work well together. But the potential for British businesses and the demand for British products around the world is a fantastic area of opportunity. And I do wish we could have done more and done that at greater velocity. And on energy, we've got to test a consensus. There's been a consensus that's formed, a well-meaning consensus. We face challenges in our environment. We do face challenges of energy insecurity. But too often, and my party was as culpable as others, but not alone, too often people have been willing to talk the talk and not put in place the plans or rehearse the trade-offs and the consequences. And so that needs to change because the world has changed, prices have changed, and we've started to see what the damage of that policy is. So we've got to move forward. We are urging the government to do that. Some of the things that they have done, actually, and I'm not being overly partisan about this, but some of the things they have done in terms of reversing the trajectory of exploitation, refusing to grant any more licenses to the resources that are under our feet, will be very deleterious, and they won't offer us the opportunity to have competitive energy prices. And I do think that needs to change. We've heard that, and we need to start the work of building a new consensus around getting our energy prices to be more competitive.
Okay, Stephen.
Andrew, thank you so much for your remarks today. One of the questions that's on people's minds is and back on your previous brief, really, Andrew, if we could do that, is around international trade and our relationship with the United States. I mean, at the moment, it's 20% of our exports for manufacturers. It's very important for the luxury automobile market for us, for pharmaceuticals, advanced electronic equipment from this country. It's the single biggest individual country market outside of what we're doing with the bloc of the EU. And so a lot of the last few weeks of up and down with the relationship has caused quite a bit of concern amongst manufacturers in this country. What is your view and what is the Conservative Party view of the relationship with the United States and how that should develop in the short term, probably, because it's hard to tell what the long term is going to be in store for us?
Well, the US is our closest single trading partner. It's not our only trading partner. It's by far not alone when you look at other trading blocs. So it is absolutely imperative to the success of our economy that we are good at trading. That's always been how the United Kingdom has reconciled the level of prosperity, the level of sophistication in many of our enterprises, with the fact that we are a relatively small domestic market. We're one of around 30 of the top economies in the world, and together with Switzerland and Singapore, if we don't trade, we don't eat. We need that trade for our economy, which is why it's so important that those businesses that export today we support, and those businesses that don't export today, we seek to help them along the way and give them that ability to break into new markets. Now, part of that is how we can form relationships with other governments. And credit where it's due, I'm very pleased that it looks like our Prime Minister has had some good early conversations with the US. very significant strategic partner for us. I think the Chancellor was talking about the opportunities for SMEs in the defence supply chain, which has always been one of our great strengths and for which the US is a significant market. Now, we have potentially, I'm not going to come along and tell you things that I can't deliver, but we have potentially the ability to form a Goldilocks trading relationship, if you like, where we can be part of the US closest friends and family and potentially avoid tariffs. And we can also continue to trade well in as frictionless a way as possible with our relations under the Common Trade Authority with European partners and benefit from some of the trading blocks and alliances that we formed with Japan and the CPTPP, who seems, I always think the sole purpose of the CPTPP is to get politicians on stage trying to deliver that tongue twister. But it is one of the fastest growing trading blocks, and it does potentially give us protection in a world where people are sometimes looking more inward upon themselves. That would be immensely harmful to the United Kingdom economy, but it would also be enormously damaging to some of your businesses and enterprises. So if we play our cards right, and this should not be a point of political divide or point scoring, but if we play our cards right as a country, then we could end up in that very favoured relationship.
A couple of questions down here. Go in the front row and then person behind after. Thank you.
Thank you. Just wanting to hark back a period of time. In 1953, we decided to build a nuclear reactor. 1956, it opened 3 years later, and it produced electricity for 40 years. If you then take that going forward, what would your proposals be to resolve probably the biggest issue we face, which is probably the public sector and our inability to do anything? I've just sat through a very interesting AI talk, which would tend to suggest that you could probably replace large numbers in the public sector, and we could retrain them into manufacturing or building or something like that, and they could go solve the housing crisis.
How long have we got?
Yeah.
This could be a long one. Look, I'll try and, it's a really important question, and it's something I've thought a lot about, and I'll try and be as brief but also as straight as possible. First of all, I've never blamed anybody. I mean, I hope I didn't criticise anyone. I don't blame people who work in the public sector. They are responding to the organisation structures and the leadership that we provide them. And so I think we should look to our democratic leaders to provide that and to deliver clear goals, targets for what we want to achieve. We've got to wrestle with two things that have happened over my lifetime. And remember, I wasn't in business, in government for that long. The first is a breakdown in democratic accountability. So many decisions, so many people in the public sector work in arm's length bodies. We'll all know them. We'll all have our own favourite. The NHS is an arm's length body, Natural England, the British Business Bank. I mean, there are a plethora of arm's length bodies, not all of which have single point democratic accountability, which makes it very hard because you will send a government of your flavour of the week to Westminster expecting them to be able to deliver for you. And in many cases, they don't have that ability. And that becomes very chilling. And it's something that we have to restore. We have to restore that ability for our elected democratic government to be able to deliver and remove some of the federation that's happened with these arm's length bodies. The second thing that has sort of crept up on us in all of our lifetime. I'm pretty old. When I did a law degree at university for interest, the entire corpus of judicial review, all the really important cases in the whole of judicial review fitted in 3 volumes on a shelf. Right? Today, every parish council, every planning application, every decision that you make is subject to the jeopardy of being second-guessed either by a formal judicial review process or somebody saying you better be careful if you don't do this exactly right. And it makes the gears turn grindingly slowly, and it drives a decision-making culture of risk aversion. So we all ask ourselves, why is government so slow? Why is it ineffective at what seems to be the most basic thing? Why have we not built a new nuclear power station since we were both infinitely younger? Why does it take so long to build the bypass, the new rail line? A lot of that is about this risk aversion, this culture of nobody ever taking a chance, nobody ever just getting on and doing things. So if somebody talks to you and says, we need, as Kemi often does, we need to rewire government, or let me just tell you about how we need to change and reform government, you know, don't go too glassy-eyed and start yawning, because that's actually, to me, a really important part of how we get back, whatever your flavour of government is, how we get back connecting government that we all send here to do a difficult job with actually a pace of delivering things at a cadence that's going to keep our economy competitive.
Yeah, there's a question behind as well, and then behind again. Are there anyone else?
Thank you. Ian Worth from Crow UK. There's been a lot of talk about preferential trade agreements with the US. Canada and Mexico both have preferential trade agreements with the US, and it's not going particularly well for either of them at the moment. How do we position ourselves in negotiating such an agreement such that UK exporters get lasting benefit and don't end up being treated the same way as Canada and Mexico?
Yeah. Look, we try. You don't know what you can achieve until you try. We've got a lot of different equities that we bring to bear. We have a very different trade pattern, certainly, than Mexico. I'm not as much of an expert on Canada, although there's a lot of energy that gets traded with Canada. We are not adjacent, so we've got a very different ability potentially for people to worry about shifting the base of US manufacturing, and we are. And people say this, but you can demonstrate this again and again. We are historically the closest ally of the United States. We have deep shared intelligence and defense relationships. In many ways, we're cut from the same DNA, and we've got some other equities that we can bring to bear with those in Washington. But the only controllable variable to me, and forgive me, I'm not the foreign anything, but the only controllable factor to me is, can we get in the room? Right? Can we get in the room and have conducive conversations and bring those arguments to bear, talk about what we can bring to that relationship, and yes, see if there are things that matter a lot to the United States that we should also be taking into account of as well. Now, that may not be within the narrow remit of trade. It could be something as extraneous as how we protect freedom of speech or how we regulate internet companies. But as ever in life, and forgive me for the truism, you've got to get in the room, you've got to put your best foot forward, you've got to try and find the best people. And our role as official opposition will be to support constructively, not to criticize, not to try and sabotage or go round that, but to try and support our government, because this matters to all of you, and I think it matters to the whole economy.
A couple of minutes left. I just want to take a question over there and then a final one here. Go.
Hello, Helen Corbett from the Press Association. Hi. The Chancellor was here earlier and she said that she wants the boost to defence spending to support UK businesses, but at the same time she's not going to pull up the drawbridge to foreign manufacturers. Do you agree with that approach?
Look, I didn't hear her in full, but we have fantastic businesses. And the job of government, to me, as a philosophical conservative, should not be to overly intervene, but equally to remove points of friction. So if SMEs, for example, they can get an order, they can compete with the very best in the world, but they can't necessarily get the financial capital to finance the working capital to fulfill that order, then we should do everything that we can to try and make sure that we have got an environment where they can get capital. If it's about skills, can we make sure that not just the quality of our education system, but our apprenticeships are responsive, that we can be agile in creating new apprenticeships in the sort of areas that the defence domain, for example, is moving into. Often quite different sort of environment and a different skill set than the manufacturing of a carrier that we would have done historically. So the job of government should be to try and knock down those barriers and not to seek to put new ones up. I didn't fully hear the Chancellor. I'm glad that she's on the page with supporting small and medium-sized enterprise businesses. Not all of her actions so far have done that, but there's an opportunity here as we try and retool our security. And I think from my exposure to that sector in particular, and other adjacent sectors like space and cyber and artificial intelligence, we can compete with the best in the world. We just need to make sure we remove the obstacles to that.
Probably got 1 minute left to that final question there, just in front of you. Just there. Yeah. Thank you.
The big paddle boards are like being given ratings out of 10 or something.
Yeah, I think I would get a 3 from Lynn. Jonathan Dudley from Crow. You, sir, are a chartered accountant. You understand the meaning of, or the necessity to balance the books, as do I. The Chancellor mentioned needing to raise national insurance during her speech this afternoon, probably spiking a few questions that could have come from the floor, which means a lot of people in this room have got some fairly significant bills to pay come April, combined with a 7.2% increase in national minimum wage, which doesn't just affect the lowest paid. Everyone actually needs that escalation on top of the employment rights bill that you referred to in your address earlier. As the loyal opposition, understanding there was a need to balance the books, what would you have done differently, if at all?
Well, I'll try not to be overly partisan about this. I mean, the first thing is we would have made different choices. So to govern is to choose. And as I said, I was being quite ecumenical in my remarks. You know, there's always a debate about the balance between tax and spending. Perfectly legitimate that different people and different parties from time to time will set that slider in a slightly different place. But let's be really clear, we would not have made the choices that the government did. They had that choice. They came out in their manifesto and said, we will not put up taxes on work. And without any sophistry, that is exactly what they've done. If you were going to break your manifesto promise, there are much simpler ways that would have been less damaging to business. Right? If you look at the litany of where the burden of this tax, as opposed to, for example, putting up income tax falls, then this uniquely damages business, it damages jobs, it's come at business, you know, and things have not been easy over a number of years for a number of reasons. So it comes at business really hard and fast when we've been buffeting anyway headwinds over the last few years. So we would have made different choices on public spending.
Go on, what would they be, though?
Well, we all have. We're not going to. I mean, we haven't got long enough. You gave me a minute. I am a chartered accountant. Yeah. I could do you a budget here and now, but we don't have time. But look,
I can make a bit more time. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Go on. We in this postcode spend 1.3 trillion pounds a year of money across the economy. And any of you in your businesses, because you'll be doing it right now to fund those national insurance rises, know that you can always make different choices. So without going into all of what they are, we spend a great deal of money in this country on welfare, on people, the sort of people that you would be giving jobs to if the government had not put up national insurance and made it prohibitively difficult to take a chance on expanding your workforce. So there are different choices that we would have made. I want to do justice to answering your question, but without going through the entire panoply of rewriting the budget. Different choices would not have raised money uniquely on business in the way that this government has, and absolutely would not be following a 25 billion gouging of business on national insurance with all of the damage to jobs in the economy that the OBR, the independent OBR, laid out, and then following it up as a coup de grace with the 250-page employment bill, which is going to be a horror show for anybody who's seeking to grow their business and employ people. Employing people is a good thing.
Getting people into work is a good thing. And most of all, giving young people their first chance on the ladder, whether it's a seasonal job, a flexible job, a part-time job, a job on a starter wage. This is an incredibly important thing in society. It's where most of us in this room started our career. Somebody took a chance on us, and they did that because the environment around employment law allowed them to give us that chance. What the government's doing is taking that chance away from too many people. It will cost the economy, and it is genuinely the wrong thing to do.
Okie dokie. Andrew, thank you very much for your time. Put your hands together for Andrew Griffith. Thank you.